around for a long time. It's probably been in the US for about 20 years, but it started in Mexico. I don't know if you guys know who Carlos Slim is. He's like the fourth richest man in the world. And he made his fortune on infrastructure and investing in Mexico when Mexico was going through a real downslide. I want to say it was late 80s, early 90s. And he just started buying things up. And his whole portfolio is called Grupo Carso, which owns airports, hotels, telecom, and a lot of infrastructure. And then the division of Grupo Carso is called America Mobile, and that's where Claro sits. And Claro, so if you go anywhere in Latin America, you'll see it's like T-Mobile in Latin America. And then in the US, it's more like T-Mobile meets Accenture with, we do a lot of integration and, making digital transformation and things like that. Yeah.
As a former journalist, I always like to think about following the dollar. But, at the same time, I remember early in my journalistic career not fully understanding this, group of radio stations that I worked for was a business and had to put, profit kind of front and center, including sometimes ahead of journalism. Talk about that in terms of the law. Is it fair to say that, obviously if there's a case and a conflict and one party is suing another, whether it's defamation or some other area, they're suing for some kind of damages, usually monetary damages. Is that at the core of many legal issues? Is either somebody is, been limited financially somehow or taking advantage of someone?
Yeah, I think, a lot of, it's funny because a lot of the legal issues, yes, it has to do with money, and a lot of it has to do with ego. And when somebody's been stripped down in public, it's pretty bad, and you want to fight back, and you do fight back. Does the money help? Well, you'd like to, you want to just win, a lot of times, but sometimes there are a lot of damages, things that can never get recovered. It can get pretty bad, but you can have your reputation ruined overnight. And I remember when Facebook and social media first started, one of the first times that it happened to a company, apparently a few people got on and just started slamming this one company, and overnight the stock fell and the company went under, just like that. And now how does a company recover from something like that? Somebody just didn't like them and just started saying things. And so again, there's a fine line. There was nothing that was legally wrong because somebody was giving their opinion and they were slamming them publicly. So there was really nothing to even sue. Could you sue? You could try, but the onus is on you, the person suing, the plaintiff, to make the case. And but there was really no case. I mean, it was somebody's opinion. So it's pretty bad out there. And I think that's why it makes your job even more important, because you guys are the ones who are setting the standard. And I think that's what's so interesting about a communications law class, is it sets parameters and guidelines of a way to move forward in a world that has no parameters and guidelines. And I think it's really important. I think everybody and their mother should take comm law. So you have an opportunity here. You have to think critically.
I think I'd like to take that last endorsement out and use it at the beginning of my next
Oh.
class this summer.
Yeah.
So we are at the bottom of the hour, but we're still open, I think, for a few questions if anybody has any that come to mind.
I have a question. So I want to go more into magazine writing versus journalism writing, well, newspaper writing. So can you touch more base on defamation and magazine writing?
Well, I think it would follow the same procedures, make sure your sources are credible, make sure you're credible. You can, your magazine, I don't know if you're starting a magazine or you're going to be working for a magazine, but they sure do have some guidelines, and a lot of times they have fact checkers. So you can rely on some help there, and they probably have a lot of resources for you to double check. And then, of course, the editor and the publisher have the last say as well. So, start off by making your, be as credible as you can. And one of the things that I do urge is because we're not required by the fairness doctrine to present both sides, I would encourage you to do it for your own sake, to make sure that your story is well thought out, and that you're presenting it that way so that people do follow you and they enjoy it. They don't have to go to 16 different channels, that they can feel that they're getting some kind of truth from you. And, it's that critical thought that you're adding to the article. I did a lot of, and that's another interesting career path, because you can also do a lot of ghost writing of articles for other people. And that's in a business into itself that could get interesting. And I've submitted on behalf of my clients in their name. And again, it's all about credibility and reputation. So now I had several different reputations when I would write an article.
Yeah, not only writing, but I've made some money in the past editing books for companies that had basically a story, but it wasn't well crafted in the way that a journalist would. I think I'd also say that if you're any kind of employee in 2022, you probably work for an employer that has a social media policy, and you want to be sure that you're following that pretty carefully. In the journalism area, take a look at the Associated Press's social media policy, because it was one of the earliest, most developed examples of how journalists should approach the potentially dangerous spaces of social media.
Yeah, and when you talk about the way companies and their policies, a lot of times, and this is something you might want to think about when you are getting hired, and you might want to ask them in the interview, because there's been a lot of people talking to me about when they post something on social media, it's their personal site. So how much can the company dictate what you do or you don't on the site? The bottom line is, this is, again, your name and your reputation, and you guys grew up with the social media, so you know how long that stuff's going to be out there and how many people potentially can see it. You're gonna have to be proud of everything that you do. So, and you want the people that are linked to you to be just as proud to know you and be connected with you. So there are some standards within yourself that you should always be projecting.
15 years into social, somebody gets fired almost every day because of something they posted. Now, do they have legal recourse? Sure, but as we've talked about, go into court and it's going to get expensive very quickly. It's going to be years before a case would even come to trial. And it's probably the case that your employer or former employer has much deeper pockets than you do as a litigant. So it can get challenging and difficult. Any other questions before we wrap it up with Dana this afternoon?
I just wanted to know, what does the world of nonprofits look like? Because currently I'm a board member at UNO's Queer and Trans Services, and that is a nonprofit student organization funded by UNO. And I did realize that there are a lot more restrictions than I originally thought. So and I'm planning to work for a nonprofit myself in the future with my career, either with content management or helping out with production or advertising.
That's a very good question. Nonprofits are considered, because they get public funding and they probably have some grants. So they probably have funding from public entities, but also citizens. So, and then you've got sponsors who may be major stakeholders as well. And depending on what, maybe it's healthcare nonprofit, maybe it's a transportation nonprofit, whatever it is, you have stakeholders. You have to be on the straight and narrow, almost as if you're working for the government, that you have to, you can be really great with your PR and advertising. I mean, you could build hype, you can have publicity stunts, you can get crazy and creative, but you have to remember that at the end of the day, you have to look at you have to choose your words carefully and your messaging carefully, and make sure that you think about the big circle. Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Is it technical? Are the technical terms right? Are the is it socially appropriate? And you have to be, you should be proud to send out that piece, and you should be proud to have it 20 years later, so good for you that you're doing that. And I wish you good luck with it. I had a lot of fun working with non-for-profits. I'll tell you real quick about a promo I did. I had 3 nonprofits that had very limited funds. And I thought, well, I don't know how to get them more business and get them the exposure that they want. It was believe it or not, it was a temple that was trying to get more people into the temple and use their facilities. It was a hepatitis C awareness campaign that wanted people to know about them. And then it was a boxing promoter who wanted to, he's always looking for ways to make money. So we held a boxing fundraiser at the temple to raise funds for hepatitis C. And it brought great PR to all 3 of them, and all of them were nonprofits. But it was a publicity stunt too. So make partnerships that are credible too. That's very important. And if you're ever stuck with PR and advertising, and make great partnerships, and then you've got some legal legal push behind you, the protection, that'd be great. Terrific. Yeah.
That form of collaboration also works very well in a social media campaign, because if you have 3 organizations behind you instead of 1 with a single message, then you have 3 groups of fans and support. And yeah, it definitely builds. That's a great question. And I think, nonprofits, obviously, as you talked about, don't have much of a budget usually. Usually you're working as a kind of a 1-person band, trying to get the work out as well as do 5 other jobs. So those are some of the biggest constraints. But from the perspective of this class, Louis, I think just having the background of what the legal boundaries are will sometimes lead you to kind of fashion a strategy that doesn't cross some legal line. I think the social one is tougher because social norms keep changing. And so, norms of gender keep changing. I mean, it's very different even from what it was 20 years ago when I launched the computer mediated communication course, and people were thinking about gender communication in chat rooms that were just text-based. It's a much different space today that we're looking at. It's much richer in terms of information. How about one more question? I think we've got time for just one more. I promised to have Dana on her way by 1:45. So who has the last best question?
I've got a question. So I've been looking to get into podcasting recently, and you guys just kind of touched on being careful kind of with like what you say. I guess because like if I get into podcasting right now, I'm not going to have a legal team behind me. So like how would you go about kind of talking about subjects that are a little touchy around the law?
Touchy around the law, you mean, may press the boundaries, is that what you said? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Well, you could get prepaid legal services, where you pay a small fee every month, and just in case you run into trouble. You could also do disclaimers, and tell people up front, listen, this, we're going to touch on some heated topics. Want you to know this, and word the disclaimer just appropriate. And I'm sure you can find examples on Google of broadcasting disclaimers. They have them on Netflix all the time. That there's a lot of heated things here. And you could also interject during the podcast. I just want to remind the audience that the things we are saying are personal opinions, and it's heated, or however you want to word it, whatever's true, you just say it. The audiences, are used to certain things. Some audiences are more, more naive than others. But all of them, if you say it, you can never, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but if you're very clear and you have the disclaimer and you say it throughout the program, you should be okay. I'm not a
Right.
lawyer, but this would be
Me
my
neither. But yeah, clearly labeled opinion allows you to exercise that opinion privilege, which isn't absolute. But if somebody sues you for defamation, it certainly can be part of your defense. So the key thing is just don't label something that is opinion. Don't call it fact if it's really more a question of opinion. I have to say, Mandy, I think you're the first, as a UNO golfer, I think you're the first student ever to join in from on the golf course, it looks like.
Yeah, we have qualifying right now, so I apologize, but
No,
yes, I'm
I'm
on the golf
jealous.
course.
I would love to be out there right now. But it speaks to, sometimes I have these debates with my colleagues about online classes. There's definitely another check on the box of something you can do that you couldn't do in a face-to-face class is be out on the golf course asking a question to a guest speaker.